The Referee's a podcast with Jack and Kelly too. Scottish Championship pass, they give us the show. Footy tales from the pitch, controversies they scratch. Every moment they'll itch, no call left to bash.
Here we go again. We're back. It is The Referee's a Podcast, season 3, episode 2. We're back. I'm Cameron, as always. Jack Curry here by my side. Well, not physically. Hi, Jack.
Hello, I'm by your side on the screen though, which is very, very cool,
actually,
which
you're
is
not
what the
quite
listeners...
yet, actually. Now you are. Well, kind of.
Now, which is what the viewers on YouTube will be seeing, and potentially the listeners on Spotify. But good welcome everybody to our obviously sleek intros as always.
Good
Hope you're all
welcome.
doing very, very well. Exactly.
Yeah.
How's your week been, Cammy boy, so far?
Aye, not bad. I've just been working away doing the usual. As you know, been at the gym as well, so been continuing that. Other than that, been fairly quiet. The weather is obviously it's still not good. It looks like summer's over, doesn't it?
Yeah, summer's been and gone. We got our 2 or 3 weeks there in July, and we enjoyed it. But it's past us now, Cam. I think that's it. We're back into the grim territory of rain.
Yeah. Well, and the big downside, or maybe big downside, is anyone listening at home, whether you know this or not, there's an eclipse happening on the. Let me just check my calendar. I've checked it that many
Like
times.
it's a week today.
Something like that. Let's have
The
a look.
12th.
The 12th. Yes, 12th, around 6 p.m. There's going to be an eclipse. However, there's not going to be an eclipse if it's cloudy and raining. So that's my fear at the moment.
Very wise point, Cam. So yeah, we'll need to keep an eyes on that.
Otherwise, it'll just get dark and no one will know why for 30 seconds.
No, we'll all be wondering. What's going on. But yeah, so that's on the horizon. Pardon the pun. But we've then got Scottish Championship action to focus on here, Cam, and we obviously were a bit late with our first episode being released. Thank you, everybody who listened and found us, because I was saying to Cam also forgot to post the episode out on
We're
socials.
rusty.
So thank you.
We've been out of the game for a little bit. It's bound to happen.
Exactly, but we've got the best audience there is in Scottish football, Cam, don't we? And we've already had, our returning listeners return, some new listeners here. Base Lichty, Cam, gave us a wee comment on YouTube saying, good to have you both back for the new season. Base Lichty, it's good to have you back as well. Obviously, and our Broth fan up there in Angus.
Yeah,
so we'll go on to talking about your side a wee bit later on, but obviously a disappointing start there for our Broth. Cam, is there anything from Spotify, or is that us for the week?
No, that's us.
That's us for the week. Cool.
That's
Well,
us. Like you say,
starting...
we went late, so no, that's where we're at just now.
Well, starting off with Base Lichty's team then, Cam, because
that's why I thought it was going to be a perfect segue into it, and then you're like, and we'll come back to your team later, and it's like, well, we can do it now. Let's do it now. In fact,
yeah, let's do it now, because
he
they
might
were
not
on the
like
road to
it,
what
though.
was going to be a difficult game, wasn't it?
Of course. It was always going to be tough, even though Ayr were garbage last year, and Arbroath were obviously not garbage, but as expected, the first season sometimes you pull that magic going up. Queen's Park done the same, pushed it really hard in the first season in the championship, and then have never been anywhere near that sort of level since. There is often a drop off second season, not always, but Arbroath still a part-time team, and although probably better funded than some other teams in the division now, certainly coming from a disadvantage coming up against Ayr United and their massive budget in comparison.
Yeah, and that's what we were touching on last season, is the fact that for all Arbroath were amazing last season, we need to remember that they're one of two part-time teams in the league still, so there's going to be that gulf and fitness even from the get-go, you feel, in this season. And as you said, that honeymoon period is, going to potentially be over. But watching the highlights, Cam, from the stupendous package which was put together once again on the SBFL YouTube channel, it was a disappointing mistake for me for Ayr United's first goal. McAdams letting the ball through, pretty easily at his near post, and then I think it's Ross Taylor who actually came off the bench pretty early on in the game for an injured Kieran Shanks, broke away in the second half and really showed his pace and an excellent finish. And he's one of the players, Cam, that came directly from Stenhousemuir with Naismith to Ayr United.
Right,
I heard a lot of good things about him in League One last season, so I'm sure the Ayr United fans, I'm sure Gary Naismith will be delighted to see someone like him, who's making the step up alongside his manager, hit the ground running. Ayr United at home, 3 points, a clean sheet. What more could their fans ask for?
That's it. They certainly struggled last year. They didn't finish, as well as they would have hoped. Obviously, Scott Brown got the boot. They've shifted their team quite heavily. From what I remember over the summer, a lot of players gone. Certainly as well, a lot of players only been there for one season. Take Mitchell for example. He's with us, as well as a bunch of other players who've since moved on. So I think going into this season, there's probably a certain amount of uncertainty around the Ayr United that was going to be shown to the field, but they've come out swinging. You'd probably expect Ayr United at home, Arbroath 2-0. You would think it's on the cards, but even still, they've managed to follow through and, like you say, collect those first 3 points. And sometimes that first 3 points can be a bit elusive. So, especially when there's been so many changes. So, well done, Ayr. Unfortunate to Arbroath there, not managing to get the anything to take home with them.
And one thing you spoke about there, Cam, which really intrigued me was, Ayr United have made such a good start to this season. They won every single one of their League Cup group stage matches. They've then followed that up with, the fifth competitive victory in a row out of 5 under their new manager, with an opening day league win. Just how impressive do you feel that is for a manager like Naismith, who's making the step up from a part-time level to a full-time level, to just hit the ground running that well?
Well, it is good. I am going to say and revisit my stance on the League Cup groups, being that I don't like to try and take too much from them, because it often throws up lots of false positives. But it is obviously a very good sign that he's come in and managed to win all of his games, especially being that they did have a Premier team in their group, didn't they? Who did they have?
beat Falkirk away 1-0.
They beat Falkirk. So, certainly a positive step. However, I don't think the step up part-time to full-time manager-wise necessarily would have the same sort of impact as it is player-wise. I'm sure there's certainly differences and things to contend with, but if anything, I think it would make it easier for the manager, being a full-time manager than a part-time manager. Obviously much more able to sculpt the team to what he wants it to be and how he wants it to play, and those extra training sessions, he can get those ideas down much quicker. So at the moment it looks like he's commanding a good system. But we'll see how that develops as the season goes on. Is this, a flash in the pan? Is it ignore the League Cup and this is, just one win at the moment? What happens in game 2? We'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, exactly. That's a really, really good point, Cam. And then let's put a wee bit of the spotlight now on Arbroath. We've got a few listeners, as we mentioned there. I wasn't really sure how, to speak about Arbroath at the start of this season, whether I was being overly harsh or not. I think one of the things I kind of said last week was how when I look at their squad, I really don't feel as though it's changed that much at all. Mm-hmm. They don't really feel as though they've added any freshness or any new signings, or there's anybody that you're really looking there that you're thinking, oh yeah, I need to watch out for him on the day, and you are expecting Arbroath to really have still that team spirit and good attitude about them. But when you look at that 11 that started against Aircam, is it really a surprise that they came away with no points?
No, not really. You can obviously certainly say something for team cohesion and keeping the squad similar. And I suppose you could even think of it. They did perform well last year, so why rock the boat and make big changes? But I think the bottom line is, Arbroath don't really have presumably the financial capacity to go and completely overhaul their team. I presume, without looking, that they have brought in a few players to freshen up, but I think probably in a financial standpoint, they've probably not been able to do a huge amount, and then they've maybe gambled on the decision of, right, let's keep the squad together and go again. But no, you are right. Ayr United have completely overhauled their squad and, have a lot of good players there. And it does just look sort of inevitable, the two teams side by side. But this is the Scottish Championship where anyone can beat anyone. So let's just all remember that, folks.
Absolutely, and Ayr United fans, Arbroath fans, this is where we want to hear a wee bit more from you. Where are you going to be happy at seeing your team finish this season? Ayr United fans, you're already setting your sights on pushing what looks like Thistle and Livy to the top two. Arbroath fans, is 8th going to be ultimate success for you this season, or are you still looking higher than that? Let us know in the comments, and we'll have a wee discuss about them next week, Cam.
That's it.
But I think we'll swiftly move on to my side,
Indeed.
Partick Thistle, and which turned out to be, you don't want to say unexpected battle, because we've said it for, the start of 3 years now, Cam, is Capello's up there with the hardest places to go in the league.
Yeah.
But with the state of Morton's squad just now, I think we were all expecting a comfortable Thistle win. 1-0 certainly wasn't that in terms of scoreline.
No.
But despite not being there on the day, having spoken to my dad who was there and different pals and whatnot, it seemed like it was a comfortable win, going on a couple more goals type of thing. I think Thistle would hit the woodwork 3 times in the match as well, before Litsosa got the goal in the 82nd minute, and I don't think Morton had a shot on target the whole game. So
No, they did not.
I think it's one of those. No, thanks for confirming that. So I think it's one of those ones looking kind of at the game. Morton is a tough place to go, and if you're Thistle, you come away with 3 points. There's going to be absolutely no complaints with that at all.
100%. Yes, you're going into the game expecting to win by a couple, but that's sort of fog of war territory, isn't it? That's going in blind. That's going in forgetting that this is Morton at the Capello, and it doesn't necessarily matter how good the team is that's playing. They'll sometimes just dig in and find that little bit extra. But yes, it did feel like the only outcome would have been a Partick Thistle victory. But as the time ticks on, you start to doubt it. You start to think, right, God damn it, this has happened again, But your boys did manage to obviously pull through, get that late goal, and like you say, secure the 3 points, take them away again. It's another win on opening day, which just gives everyone that little boost, that little bit of encouragement. The feeling that the work that's gone on behind the scenes pre-season is working out. And despite the fact Morton not getting any shots on target, they might be reasonably pleased in the fact that they held off for so long, but that's a worrying sight if that is the case, isn't it?
Yeah, defending well in matches, genuinely does only get you so far, obviously, before ultimately, what the classic phrase is, goals win games, because ultimately, if you just draw every game even 0-0, it's probably not going to be enough in some leagues to save you. So it's an interesting one, Cam. I think from Thistle's perspective, Mark Wilson summed it up perfectly for me in his post-match comments, where he said after the first 2 games last season, which included a home match against Morton, Thistle only had 1 point. We started this season after a first game with 3. So even if you just look at that in such a basic and simplistic form, which it is, it's still tangible evidence of progress from where we're at the beginning of last year. So it's not getting carried away. It's nothing like that. It's a 1-0 win against Morton. It's a decent start, but I think when you're kind of seeing what's being built, the kind of transfers that we've signed, the desire from Fitzpatrick and the goal to beat his man, get the ball in the box for it to eventually to fall to Sosa. There is just something about this Thistle team under Mark Wilson, and I really am pleased to sort of see it not just be a thing from last season and the deflation from St Mirren kind of takes it away. It sort of seems as though it's there this season, and hopefully it again is something that can just build and build and build as the season goes on.
Yeah, for sure. Obviously positive for you getting a victory straight out the gate, and feeling like there's progress. That's half the battle, is keeping the fans on side. So a nice result like that certainly does the business. And I think maybe it's maybe unfair to say Morton are just holding off for a draw and stuff. When you really look at the gulf in the teams between Morton and Partick Thistle, you guys have been title challengers for the most part, and in the playoffs for who knows how many years, whereas Morton up until recently just like to occupy sort of sixth position and just be a hard team to play against. So I think looking at the face of it, you're expected to get the victory. They've done reasonably well. Just obviously there's no points for only losing by one.
Absolutely, absolutely. And then that takes us on to the Highlands, where
Certainly
there
does.
wasn't even point apiece, but there wasn't even a goal, in which I think we were both expecting these two teams to maybe produce a wee bit more and get some more bums off seats. But ultimately, the point shared at the Cali Thistle Stadium. Cam, how do you think both managers will sum up their opening day point?
I think you've got to imagine both will be reasonably happy. Inverness first game back in the championship against a well-funded and a well-put-together Dunfermline squad. Dunfermline, on the flip side, are travelling all the way up to Inverness to play what appears on the face of it to be another well-put-together Inverness team. So I think they'll both be reasonably pleased that they've not lost. I think more so than the fact that they drew 0-0. Presumably both managers will be asking questions as to why they've not scored, especially looking at the stats of Inverness. 19 shots, 7 on target, despite having less of the possession. So presumably countering hard and well, but just not able to get the ball past the line. I'd like to hear from anyone who was at the game. Obviously we weren't there. We don't know how the game flowed and how it actually was at the ground, so do let us know. But yeah, I think both sides will probably be tentatively okay with the fact that they didn't lose.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, one of the things you touched on there was Dunfermline's, improvements this season, and their fans will, be delighted at the return of Aston Oxborough, who popped up with a couple of really vital saves, Cam, and that match, you touched upon it there, with Inverness's 19 shots. What was it you said there? 7 on target.
Yeah.
I remember seeing a couple of them in the highlights package. Just how big of a signing do you think he'll be? I mean, he obviously wasn't available for Dunfermline when they played against Thistle in the second leg of the playoff match, and that obviously arguably cost them on the night with the goalkeeping mistake by the replacement that was brought in, Billy Terrell. How important a player will Aston Oxford be? And ultimately, is there an argument that he is a Premier League standard goalkeeper playing in the Championship?
Well, I mean, he essentially is, yes, he was second fiddle at Motherwell, but it's not necessarily because he was worse. It's just he wasn't the number one, and he obviously felt, and the club felt, he was ready for first team football, but he just wasn't able to supplant their current goalkeeper. So off he goes, And in this game, 7 saves for Oxborough there. So he's obviously doing the business. He certainly, I remember the game that we played against him last year where he was in goals. He pulled off some magnificent saves in that game as well. And I think every time I've seen him play, he has pulled something out the top drawer. So certainly does feel like he's just a touch too good for this level. The pace at which the play progresses and stuff, maybe he's just able to sort of see it all coming and position himself really well and stuff. But yes, certainly seems to be a mighty fine goalkeeper.
Definitely, and I think just a touching point on this game is I think clean sheets and a really good goalkeeper. I feel Cam at the Championship goes a long way. So I think we've both predicted Dunfermline to finish third this season, and I think he's a big reason behind that.
Certainly.
But moving on now, it's your time to talk about your game. You were through in Livingston. Is it West Lothian, East Lothian, West Lothian?
It's Lothian.
For that one. It's Lothian. Glenn Whelan's first game in charge, obviously 2-0 win, Robbie Muirhead double. What was your thoughts on the match, Kim?
It's hard to say, really. Like, we didn't play particularly well, but I think we were set up to be playing against, big team Livingston. We didn't have a lot of the ball, but we did have, at least in the first half, a couple of solid chances, maybe some of the better chances of the earlier part of the half. Jack Hamilton nearly scored if he wasn't essentially horizontal rather than upright. He leaned back so hard that the ball may have left the stadium, but it was a good opportunity if he had just taken it without falling over, unfortunately. Then not much happens in the first half, really. A couple of chances either way, but nothing too worrying. Second half, Lewis Stewart latches onto a mistake from the Livingston defence. Dukes past him, beats another guy with his pace, 1-on-1 with the keeper, tries to hit it over him, hits the bar. Then literally 12 seconds later, the ball's in our net for Robbie Muirhead's first. So the game could have hinged completely the other way had that ball just been a touch lower off of Lewis Stewart's boot. But that's football sometimes, and you actually see it in the highlights as well. Obviously, Stewart's running back, everyone's running back, trying to stop this quick counter attack, and as the ball goes in, you just see him drop to his knees, head in his hands. He knows that he should have scored, and had he scored, we wouldn't be losing. And you see quite a lot of the players sort of drop to their knees, essentially, just like, what has happened? We should be winning. And I think at that moment, at least some of them, the heads drop a wee bit. We make some changes after that point, but it's just not enough to revitalise it. And then we lose another poor goal, again, to Robbie Muirhead, as always. And that was that, game over. Again, you bring on subs maybe a touch too late and try and push for things, but there wasn't much happening, and at no point did it really look like we were realistically going to get back into the game. So it was disappointing. We didn't really look good enough, but I would say at the same time they didn't look exceptional. It looks pretty good on the stats and the highlights. They've had 20 shots, 7 on target. Our keepers had 5 saves, but they were all, the shots that made it through and went on target, they weren't fantastic, apart from the 2 that obviously went in. But yeah, it could have been worse, but it could have very easily also been better.
I mean, from a Queen's Park perspective, I'd imagine for yourselves, you were playing, what will probably be one of the top 2 sides in the league away from home in the first game of the season. So it's a difficult place for you to start from, and arguably your fixtures should only get easier from here. Although, as you've already touched upon, this is the Championship.
Yeah.
But what I was going to ask you, and you kind of touched upon it there, but I'll just ask the question anyway. This is Glenn Whelan's, first job in management. As I spoke about last week, there's that question mark over him. We literally have nothing to base him off of. Judged on what we know Livingston from before, we're never about playing the prettiest football. They were, really hard working, really industrious. They won the battle first. Is that the same Livingston under Glenn Whelan, or is there that shift in style? How would you sum them up?
I felt they were a bit more direct. They were
more direct.
Yeah, they were fairly direct. Quite a lot of boys waiting out on the wings for the ball and then driving forward. That Carey, Luckily, he wasn't able to really unleash his famed left foot, but he was
Mm.
always by himself out on the right, and the ball would always get put out there, and then it was him taking on who would it have been out there, left back, Shields. And he just had him every time, and cutting in and passing it off or knocking a shot. Obviously, as I say, he didn't manage to line it up and fire the shots off as well as he can do, but they certainly have it within them, Livingston, if they can iron out some of their niggles in their front lines. But they certainly played some decent stuff, some nice passing bits here and there, and they did obviously have opportunities. They just sort of squandered them in the sort of vital moments. There's certainly a team in there. They certainly are something, I think, to be worried about once they get it all hooked up and firing. I'd say they looked more exciting than they did last time.
Interesting. That's a pretty glowing report there on Livingston from yourself, I must say. So intrigued to see.
Oh, the
how,
one thing I will say,
they
sorry,
got
that
on.
I completely forgot, just noticed it there. Their centre back Kabongolo, he should have 100% been sent off in the first half. He received a yellow card for a last man challenge on Jack Hamilton. So the ball's coming down from an elevated position. He puts his foot out and just completely misses the ball, and it bounces under him, and Jack Hamilton continues to run through, and this guy just leaves his leg in. There's not realistically a covering defender. The other defender's behind the play and quite far off to the right. If Jack Hamilton is past him with the ball, he's certainly getting a shot off. I think it should have been a red, but I'll leave that decision down to anyone who's seen it themselves. But sketchy one.
Interesting. If you were at the game, Livingston fans, Queen's Park fans, do let us know. And can bring that up, because I know that sounds like a hotly contested type of decision that we saw quite a few times last season. So yeah, that's certainly interesting, Cam, to mention. And then that takes us to the final game, which I'm sure there'll be one set of supporters who will be delighted and one set of supporters who really would come away disappointed. And that was Wraith Rovers at home against Stenhousemuir. Cam, 1-1 after Wraith Rovers going ahead. How do you kind of sum that one up?
Oh, you hit the nail on the head. There's one set of fans and a team and manager who are going to be pretty happy at the result, and there's going to be one side that is going to be, I would say, pretty annoyed. Stenhousemuir, obviously the new team up in the division as well, also part-time, away from home to Wraith Rovers, who are a good team. And you'd have expected Wraith Rovers to do better. You'd have expected them to, presumably get a couple of goals against newly promoted Stenhousemuir, but they've not managed it. They've taken the lead early on, not managed to hold it for more than 11 minutes, and then from that point on, Stenhousemuir have managed to hold off. Keepers had a little bit to do there. It looks like the goalkeepers had to make 4 saves, but 4 saves, that doesn't sound like enough. Wraith Rovers, you've got to imagine, should be doing better than that. Looking at the formations, they both seem to be playing at a similar sort of formation, but you don't know how it's all set up. BBC doesn't quite put it all down in realistic terms, so it's hard to say. What are your thoughts on the game?
I mean, I think definitely the kind of underlying factor for me would be it's already 2 points drop for Wraith, and this is going to be really interesting to see if this is going to be the benchmark result that Stenhousemuir can get, because if they can go away from home and pick up these points sprinkled in with enough home wins, then they will stay up this season. There's no doubt about that. Mm-hmm. I think one of the interesting things, Cam, again, I'm going to reference back to the highlights package, was Paul McMillan's opener for Wraith Rovers was fantastic, cutting in from the left on his right foot and fired a great strike into the far corner. But the hilarity of the, you had the beautiful strike there, compared to Stenhousemuir's goal, which was Wraith Rovers player trying to clear the ball which smacked right off of Lewis Hodcase's face in the 6-yard box. Slip past Josh Ray was just beautiful.
Yeah.
So they all count the same way,
It's true.
and I think that's the one thing that you'll get from Stenhousemuir this season. They'll be hard working, they'll do their bit, and I think Wraith Rovers fans will be screaming, "So will we under Imrie." But I think when you are Wraith Rovers and you've got the better players, that's not enough.
Yeah,
That's
sure.
where you have to have that wee bit of tactical nous, or you need to have that wee bit of quality on the ball. And Wraith Rovers had enough players on the day to win that game, with Anton Dowds, Dylan Easton, John Robertson, Paul McMillan, all starting the game. But ultimately, they've came up short.
Well, what do you think about this? Do you think it's maybe down to the way that Dougie Emery gets his teams to play? You've got all these
Could be.
good, talented players here in the park. Should be able to break down, a part-time Stenhousemuir, but they're playing like a bruiser game rather than putting their skill sets to use.
It could be. I mean, having not watched the game, but we know what
I
an
know.
Emery team looks like.
Yeah. It's,
So it's an interesting point, Cam. It's as I said last week when we made the predictions, as I feel as though Wraith Rovers, as we all know, have that good team, but they just never seem to be able to put it together.
yeah, it's true.
So it ultimately could
that's,
cost them. But it's week one, so
Yes.
let's not be too harsh.
Week 1, and that's for the final game there. So, some of the results to be expected, some a bit more surprising, but on the whole, not a bad first week back to the championship. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I completely agree, Cam. I completely agree. And I think, to be fair, it sets up what's looking to be a really exciting second week. We've got some big fixtures at the top and the bottom.
Yeah,
Which we may as well just get straight on to, because
that's true.
Friday night football is back.
Damn right it is.
Which is fantastic. We haven't had to wait long for that at all. With a slightly earlier kickoff time, it appears, for all the Friday night games this season of 7:30.
Oh, yeah.
Instead of 7:45. So I'm interested
What's the
to know.
arbitrary reason behind that, do you suppose?
I've absolutely no idea.
Do you think it's just because
So-
the programme that's on before it or after it had to change its slot, or it's 15 minutes shorter? So what's
I
on
would-
before it? Is it the news on before it? Have they shortened the news by 15 minutes?
I genuinely don't know. What I would like it to be is that they're now starting the programme at 7 and giving us half an hour of build-up, and then that means that the game finishes earlier so that we can get an extra 15 minutes of end coverage at the end of the game. But I doubt that is going to be the reason.
No, it's going to be because
Um,
another programme is shorter or longer.
But if anybody does know the reason behind the change of kick-off times, because 7:30 just doesn't look right to me.
I don't know. I like it. You'll finish half time at 15:15.
I don't know, it just looks weird seeing 7:30.
Yeah.
Anyway, we're digressing.
Yes,
but,
we are. There's football on that time. So let's talk
and it's a
about that.
mouth-watering game, Cam.
It
It's
is.
Partick Thistle at home against Livingston.
No wonder it's been
What-
selected for TV so early on.
Exactly. What way do you think it's going to go ultimately? Because the one thing that's on my mind here, Cam, is,
Yeah.
we've both backed it to the top two. You look across social media, this is pretty much everybody's top two as to where it's going to finish in the league. We know how strong Thistle were at home last
Yeah.
season, completely unbeaten in the league
Mm-hmm.
at home. Do you think that type of record's possible again? And
Mm-hmm.
just how important is getting a marker against your title challengers at such an early point of the season?
Well, I think, unfortunately for you, the fact that you've just mentioned that is now going to mean that you're going to lose the first game of home at this season because you were completely unbeaten at it last season. I don't make the rules. That's just how superstition and stuff works. So just keep that in mind. Putting that aside, you're right. Great home record. Completely unbeaten at home last year. I think that certainly gives you the edge. If you're looking at Partick Thistle and Livingston being a fairly similar level, which I think we generally speaking are. Obviously, I have Livingston to win, whereas you have them second, and Thistle is the opposite for us. So, yeah, you've got to then put it to other things, which is home advantage, and you certainly seem to have that. So yeah, I think an exciting one and a very good game to pick for TV. Although now that I've said that, it's probably going to be a 0-0 draw or something, isn't it?
I mean, I really, really hope not. You know, I don't think we see too many Thistle 0-0s. But, you know, I really, really hope it isn't, and it's an exciting game. You know, goals, obviously, all to the red and yellow. But it is really interesting to see how, you know, two kind of big sides in the division, you know, kind of come against each other at the early part. As you said, you know, sides really haven't got up to speed yet, you know, whether that's adapting to new tactics, you know, whether that's finding that extra yard of fitness.
Yeah.
So it will be really interesting. You know, something that I want to bring up from Saturday going into this week, Cam, which, you know, I'm sure you won't want to hear, but I have to mention it, was the outpouring of calls for Seb Draws to start in the next match for Thistle. Apparently he was an absolute game changer when he came on at the Capello.
Yeah.
So it's going to be really, really interesting to see whether Mark Wilson...
He's a traitor.
I'm sure you'll be standing there with your cardboard cutout signs when he comes to Lesser Hampden some point later on this season.
A traitor sign, not a cardboard cutout.
Well, that's what I mean. Yeah, that's what I was trying to go for.
I thought you were trying to say that I'd have a cardboard cutout of him.
No.
Maybe I would get a cardboard cutout of him, and you put crosses over his eyes.
God, brittle.
I know. But he is a traitor.
So yeah, but I think he's going to be a big player for Thistle this season, Kim.
Yeah.
You know, I really, really do. So hopefully, he alongside many others can create a bit of magic. I take it you'll be watching this like many others in the house whilst I attend.
Well, I had thought about it, but now that you've mentioned Seb Draws, I don't know that I will. But I probably will. But I might not.
You might not, just for that.
Exactly.
But listeners, let us know if you're going to be watching, or Thistle fans. I know there's a few of you out there that listen. Let us know how you're feeling ahead of the game. Let us know how the game goes, and we'll get the comments talked about on next week's episode. But then that takes us on, Cam, to 4 really, really good games on the Saturday.
Yeah.
And I think this is going to be a really interesting one. It's Arbroath against Inverness. We spoke about Arbroath's troubles in the opening day of the season. We've kind of slated Arbroath, if you like, almost quite a bit on this podcast so far this season. But I think this is going to be the real test for them. You know, they're at home against one of the 2 newly promoted sides.
Yeah.
You know, this is the type of game last season, early on in the season, where Arbroath got the points on the board and they really established themselves as a side to take seriously in the league this season. And I feel as though this is their chance to do that again this year.
100%. You know, they've got to show that, you know, they're not the whipping boys. You know, they've got to put a marker down against Inverness and say, no, here, take this beating. You need this. Arbroath certainly need the points, like you say, need points on the board. A little bit of momentum goes a long way, so getting points on the board early just takes that little bit of edge off. You don't want to go on weeks and weeks worrying about the first 3 points. You know, it's enough to sink you. So no, they'll be certainly looking to get 3 points on the board. But then at the same time, you know, you've spoken of Inverness's business quite highly. Do you think their team has enough about it to, you know, put the sword to Arbroath a little bit on Saturday?
Well, again, I think what you were getting on there is really, really interesting, because for what we were talking about in Arbroath and how big a chance this is for them to put down a marker, it's the perfect flip of the coin for Inverness to do exactly the same.
Yeah.
You know, this is a chance for Inverness to go and say to everybody, we can go to places like Arbroath and come away with a win. And if they can go to places like Arbroath and come away with a win, then there's a good chance they can go to anywhere and come away with a win. So it's a big, big game for them. You know, if Inverness don't come away with all 3 points, it's not the end of the world.
Yeah.
But if they do, then it's a massive, massive plus.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. They'll obviously, both teams are going to be wanting to go there and get the win. But I don't know how I think about that game. I'm not sure where it's going to go. But I'll certainly be keeping a keen eye on that one as the fixtures are coming in on Saturday.
Definitely. And as I touched upon, Cam, the more I look at this week's fixtures, the more brilliant they are.
Yeah.
Because what comes next is Dunfermline against Ayr. What I feel as though this weekend's fixtures are doing are probably pitting sides who are really close together in the league against each other.
Yeah.
And I feel as though Dunfermline against Ayr are that. Two sides that will look to finish in the playoffs come the end of the season. Dunfermline are at home against Ayr.
Yep.
5 out of 5 under Gary Naismith. How's it going to go?
This one is a mighty tough one. Obviously, it's not the same sort of big moment as it was last year with the two, ex-Celtic guys, managing it off against each other. Ayr have since moved on, but Dunfermline have went from strength to strength. They've arguably better than they were last year. Yes, they struggled towards the start of the season last year, but by the end of the season, I think they had the best record in the league. They obviously had fantastic cup runs. So I think there's certainly something to be feared from this Dunfermline team. Are Ayr United good enough? Maybe. It's hard to say at the moment, but I think you've certainly got to look Dunfermline the slight favourites for that one overall, but maybe just more so down to home advantage and the fact that Dunfermline are going to pack that stadium out with thousands of fans.
Absolutely, Cam. I think home advantage for Dunfermline, could be such a big thing this season. And I think that's where they'll really look to do their business at home. Get the points on the board, and kind of likewise, if they get draws like they did on the opening day of the season, that's absolutely fine. If they can make East End Park a fortress, I think Dunfermline fans will, freely admit that their home form's probably let them down quite a lot over the last couple of years. I think Queen's Park have went there. You have enjoyed wins there. Thistle have picked up plenty of points there as well.
We've enjoyed plenty of
sides.
0-0s at East End Park. We seem to be, if we're going to have a 0-0 anywhere, it's always there.
Yeah, so
It's rough.
I think that's where then, as you're touching on, it's an area for Dunfermline to improve upon.
For sure.
In a game like Ayer's one of them. I think on the flip side, almost exactly for what I said with Inverness, if Ayr can go away to Dunfermline and win, make it 6 out of 6 under Naismith, I think that's when you really have to sit up and take note.
Definitely.
But I feel as though saying that, we've said that a lot about Ayr United in the past, so we don't want to get too ahead of ourselves.
Yes, exactly. For me, I'm ignoring the League Cup. So they've won one game. So we'll see how this one goes. Like you say, they go to Dunfermline and they do that. They'll show that they do mean business. But swiftly moving on, my lot up next. We are at home. Now, our manager last year kept on making a big point that he wanted to make Lesser Hampden a hard place to come. And I think by the end of the season, we weren't losing very many at home. So I'm hoping that can continue on again when Wraith Rovers join us at Lesser Hampden on Saturday. Looking at everything before the season started, obviously we spoke highly of Wraith Rovers, expecting them to finish highly. Queen's Park not quite so high. However, they didn't play obviously amazingly in their opening game. They weren't able to get the vital 3 points. Queen's Park were never expected to win their first game, being that it was away to Livingston, whereas Wraith Rovers were expected to win. So this one will be an interesting one to see sort of where the two teams stack up against each other, based on the fact that Wraith probably should have done better from their opener.
As a Queen's Park fan, what's your expectation going into it? Do you think this is like must win, or are you kind of just early season, we'll take a point?
I think if the season is going to go the way the manager wants it to go, it's a must win, and therefore that's the way the team will be playing, and that's the way they'll be set up, hopefully on the front foot and really looking to go for it. That's what I'm hoping. Whether that is what actually happens or what we see, again, you don't know. We've had not massive overhaul, but a few changes in the team, and a few younger lads as well, sort of presumably playing a bit more of a part this year. So as long as we can get over some of the teething problems, receiving, maybe picking up the ball after an opposition attack, and then just sort of hoofing it up the park and losing it immediately because there's no one there, and then just sitting on the pressure again. We need to try and just calm down a little bit. If we can manage to just keep our heads on Saturday there, I think we've got a decent chance. I like the look of the boys when they're playing well. So fingers crossed that does translate on Saturday.
Yeah, definitely an interesting one again. So yeah, look forward to hearing all about it next week, Cam. And then that takes us on to the final game down at Oakville View. Stenhousemuir against Morton, Cam. It's a big one. You know, you don't want to say big one down at the bottom, obviously this early on in the season, but you know, that's where you kind of feel as though these two teams, you know, will probably end up. Just how important is this for Morton not to get beat?
Oh, it's huge. No, it's huge. But at the same time, they are playing away from home. You know, it's hard to say whether Steny are going to be a tough team to play at home. In my head, they are. You know, they're the Warriors. So certainly I can imagine it being a tough game for Martin. But you're right. Certainly in the heads of the fans and the players, they know the situation at the club. They know the money issues. They're going to desperately want to see at least something positive. So they're going to really want those 3 points. But again, on the flip side, Stenhousemuir, again, looking to, you know, push on a wee bit and get as many points on the board as early as possible to try and, you know, stay in the division. So like you say, it's weird to say it so early on, but it is a huge game for both clubs there. I don't think it will be a game that necessarily has a bearing on how the entire season goes, but it will certainly be a load off their minds if they're able to win, and that's both sides, you know.
100%. I mean, I think the one thing that I keep thinking up with Morton just now is, you know, the feeling of the fans, you know, and we touched upon it last week. It's really understandable just now if you're a Morton fan and you're angry, you know, because you're looking at the state of the squad. You know, they had a good affiliation, obviously, with Imrie, who left for a league rival.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they look at the lack of finances at the club, and they look at the fact that already after one game of the season, everybody is telling them that the only place that they're going is League One. You know, you're seeing calls for the manager head online. You know, you're seeing calls for the head of the board online from Morton fans. So the one feed I have for them is if they came away from Stenhousemuir on Saturday, you know, with any kind of defeat, that's only going to fuel the flames of ill feeling at Capello. And when they are snowballing so heavily at the start of the season, it's just not good on any level.
No, definitely not. But it's a long season yet to go. Obviously, one game down. Next one coming up now. There's bound to be a whole host of things that go on this season, and I'm just so excited looking ahead to see how it all goes. However, we've got one last thing in this podcast to do yet. We made some predictions last week, Jack Curry.
We did. It's everybody's favourite part.
We have to make some new predictions again this week. So we'll briefly look back over the last ones. You had a fairly good week, actually, fairly solid, getting 4 half correct, and one just wrong, whereas I only got 2 half correct and nothing else. So we both said that Ayr were going to win, but we got the score wrong. We both said that Thistle were going to win, but we got the score wrong. You had Inverness and Dunfermline as a draw, but you had a very high score in 2 each draw. Obviously, being 0-0, I had Inverness to win. Although I said at the time it was silly, I put the Queen's Park game down as a draw, and you quite rightly put Livingston down for a win, but again, got that scoreline wrong. And then we both thought that Wraith Rovers were going to win their game against Steny, so we'd neither get points for that. So 4 points for you, me. 8 points for you. So a nice start for you in terms of the prediction portion that we do at the end of the podcast here. So congratulations to you, but hopefully
thank you very much.
It'll be the last. I think I started last week, so it is your turn, but hold off because I just need to pull up my iPad so I again don't almost cut the recording. I really need to
I was going to say, whilst you I was going to say, whilst you do that, I'll just very briefly explain the rules to any new listeners we have for
That's
this
a
season.
good
And if you want to
idea.
take part at home, because what we do here is obviously, as Cam's explained, predict all 5 of the championship games which are going to be happening that week. And we want you to play along at home, messages in with your scores at the end of each week, and we can keep a wee tally amongst us all going. You can play against us, you can play amongst yourselves. The way it works is you get 2 points for a correct result prediction.
Yeah.
So, for example, I think I predicted Thistle to win 2-0. They won 1-0, so I get 2 points. But if you correctly predict the correct score line, you get a whopping 5 points.
Yeah.
So, a correct score can make all the difference there. So I've got 8 points with my 4 correct results. Cam's got 2, and I presume we're now ready, Cam, for me to kick us off with the predictions for week 2.
Certainly am.
So we've got Partick Thistle, Cam, up against Livingston at Firhill, and what is going to be a fantastic tie. I'm really looking forward to going to Firhill on Friday night for the game.
Yeah.
And I'm going to back Thistle all the way to a
course.
2-1 victory.
2-1 victory. We'll get it locked in there. I think you're going to win as well. I'm going to go... Oh, I don't know. I'm going to go 1-0.
You wanted to say 2-1 as well, didn't you?
Yes and no. It certainly was in my mind initially, but I did want to change it up, and I just thought 3-2 was a bit crazy.
Fair dues. So yeah, that's the Friday night game done. Then it takes us on to our Saturday ones, and it's Arbroath up against Inverness. A run of really, really tricky games to predict here.
Yes.
For this one, I'm going to go for a draw. I'm going to say 1 each.
1 each. I'm going to go for a different result in my Inverness prediction again this time. I'm going to go for a 2-1 Arbroath victory.
2-1 Arbroath victory. Very interesting. Then we go to East End Park for Dunfermline Athletic at home against Ayr United. And I'm going to predict the Ayr United bubble to burst just ever so slightly here.
Yeah.
I'm going to go for a 1-0 Dunfermline win.
I'm with you there. I also think Dunfermline are going to have the better of Ayr. And I'm going to join you actually. 1-0 Dunfermline.
Yep, like-minded minds thinking there.
Like-minded minds thinking. That is exactly how that saying goes.
That's exactly what I was trying to say, and I said it well.
Exactly.
Then that takes us to Lesser Hampden, Cam, for your side, Queen's Park.
Yes.
Again, I'm struggling with my prediction on this. I really feel like it could go either way. I'm going to say 2-2.
Okay, yeah, not bad. I am going to take the boys for a victory this week, and I'm going to go 2-1.
2-1 Queen's Park. That'd be a big win for yourself.
I would love it.
And then down to Oakle View for Stenhousemuir against Morton. How do you sum this game up? It's going to be interesting.
Yeah.
I don't know why. I'm going to give Morton a wee bit of credit here, and I'll say 1 each.
Well, I will not be. I'm going for a 2-0 Steny victory.
Oh, 2-0 Steny victory, Cam.
Yeah,
So why don't you give our listeners a wee run through of all the predictions there?
Yes. So, starting off Friday night, Thistle against Livy. We've both taken Thistle to win. I've got 1-0. You have 2-1. Arbroath Inverness. I have taken Arbroath to win that one 2-1. You have a draw 1 each. Dunfermline against Ayr. We've both taken 1-0 Dunfermline. Queen's Park against Wraith Rovers. I have 2-1 Queens. You have 2-0. And Steny Morton, I have 2-0. And you have taken 1 each for that one.
Fantastic, Cam. Fantastic. Listeners, for sticking with us for so long. And this is just about rounding off episode 2 of season 3.
Boom, that's it. We've sorted it. So thank you all very much for listening. That's another one down. We'll be back again next week to have another look at the games that we've just had a very brief rundown. We'll give you the full action-packed dialogue about it next week. So hopefully you'll come back for that one.
Definitely, and make sure to like the video, share it on Spotify, tell your pals, and ultimately enjoy whatever game you're going to at the weekend. And we'll see you next week. Bye, guys.